coffee is proof that higher powers love us. Okay, it's not the setup we want, but it's the setup we get. Hey friends, it's your good friend Tim Campbell-Smith, and today we are talking about the difference between the social service worker diploma, a bachelor's degree in social work, master's and PhD in social work in Ontario, and what kind of jobs they get you and why you may pursue one and maybe not the other. It kind of, I'm not gonna lie, it strikes me as kind of wild that these are all very professional degrees and diplomas, and yet the master's is seen as the standard. We're going to talk about why. We're going to talk about what that looks like, what those jobs do look like at each level with some tips and suggestions. If you're new to the channel, my name is Tim. I'm a social work student, photographer. I've been a digital marketing consultant, and now I'm coming into social work. So let's talk about it. Before we go too far, make sure you like and subscribe for all things mental health, business, higher ed, life. Okay, so here's the general lay of the land. Social service worker diploma is the most entry-level post-secondary training that you can do to work in social and human services. It is typically done in 2 years. There are, I believe, accelerated programs. You can do them a little bit faster. I believe there are also some programs that are a slight bit longer with specializations. And typically these jobs work in group settings, so you're usually working with groups of people, or when you do, there is some one-on-one work, but it's more like connecting them to services and kind of following up and deploying programs. So for example, you may work in a group home, overseeing everybody, especially with varying shifts. You may work at a food bank, checking in on folks who are accessing your services, connecting them to other services. You may work in addictions, kind of like overseeing large groups of people, making sure that like everybody's kind of going, like following according to plan, doing some basic check-ins. You may also work with nonprofits and charities, especially doing support work and working with anybody who your charity or your not-for-profit supports. Because we'll see this with the bachelor's degree, but especially for these entry-level jobs, or for those who have either a social service worker diploma or a bachelor's degree, you may not be doing a job that uses the title social worker or social service worker. Next is the bachelor's of social work. Again, this doesn't open up as many jobs. It definitely opens up more jobs than the social service worker diploma. Like the social service worker, you're often providing support to groups of people, though with the bachelor's you may be doing some more group facilitation, some group, dare I say, counseling and supports. That way, you're going to be doing probably a little bit more case management, which you may not be doing with your social service worker diploma, and you may be doing just a little bit more one-on-one clinical, but not to the point where it's like therapy, where it's long-term therapeutic. And just like the social service worker diploma, you may not be doing jobs that have the term social worker. Please note, a lot of what we're talking about today ties to another video I have on like the levels of social work and social work jobs. So if you're curious about social work jobs, I'd also recommend checking out that video. It's linked here, and that'll help. Like these two will kind of complement, so that you can figure out like, what kind of job do I want? What is the required educational credential to get it? The other thing worth noting with the Bachelor of Social Work I found, and this was also from informational interviews with social workers, you're more likely to take on jobs that don't have the title of social worker, and those titles are a little more varied. So I definitely saw job titles that refer to community management, community development, some fundraising, but like and especially program administration for charities and not-for-profits. So I saw some in sexual health, in community building, in like poverty alleviation, working with folks experiencing homelessness, food banks. You're more likely to be like a program manager or a facilitator there than have the title of social worker. And we typically see that in the bachelor's degree. That said, if you go on to a master's degree, a master's in social work, the general rule is that the master's of social work is the standard, the go-to educational credential for most social work jobs. And most employers are looking for the master's. The master's length varies. You can get into a master's of social work without a bachelor's of social work, but typically your degree will take 2 years. Versus if you go into a master's of social work already with your bachelor's of social work, your program is typically only 1 year. Please note, when I say it's only 1 year, it is 1 calendar year, 3 semesters, because you have a lot of classes and you have your mandatory practicum time. Master's is the standard, especially for jobs that require more one-to-one, more advanced knowledge of kind of like human beings, systems. So we're looking at schools, we're looking at hospitals, we're looking at therapy and therapeutic services. So if you want to go into either private practice as a therapist, or you want to work in another setting as a therapist, that especially one-to-one or with couples, the master's degree is typically what you're going for. The other interesting technical reason for why most people go for the MSW, the Masters of Social Work, is actually insurance. So for different employers to carry insurance for their social workers, or for social workers in private practice in offering therapeutic services, most insurance providers will insure or provide reimbursement when you engage with someone with a master's degree, an MSW. So I know, for example, my therapist, who's covered under benefits, I can only get benefits if my therapist has an MSW. If my therapist only had a bachelor's of social work, she would not be covered by insurance. And finally is a PhD in social work, which is actually not terribly common, especially in Ontario. First, PhDs in social work are hella competitive to get into. I was looking into, just to get a rough number, and I think there was only like 7 or so universities in Ontario that offer a PhD in social work. More schools offer the bachelor's or master's of social work, but only 7 offer a PhD in social work. And even then, the cohorts are so tiny. I'm estimating that there's roughly only, at the time of recording, about 50 spots for PhD students each year in the entire province of Ontario for PhDs. And a PhD in social work leads to very niche and very specific jobs. So if you kind of looked at it on a graph, like social service workers would have maybe this some of the smallest number of job opportunities. It would increase with bachelors, it would peak at masters, and then it would come down again. There aren't as many job opportunities specific to and tailored to a PhD in social work. All of this to say, in Ontario, it seems that the gold standard for educational credentials is to get the Masters of Social Work. Let's unpack each one a little bit more, though. Each level of educational credential in social work is super necessary. We need people at all levels, of all experience levels. So please don't ever interpret, especially in this video, that like one is better than the other. No, everybody serves a role, and we need folks working at all levels. Social service workers are typically working with many different people. I kind of call it like on the ground. So like they're facing people, trying to support them as much as they can. So you're seeing folks in like harm reduction who are like actually out on the street talking to folks about the use of different substances or addictions. You have folks who are actually following up on programs and administrating programs. So like a family member of mine has her social service worker diploma, and she was providing especially like online and phone support to people experiencing like homelessness, near homelessness, addictions, and then she would meet with them one-on-one. And something cool that I thought this was so impressive that she learned this in school and then she taught others as a social service worker was like social skills and life skills to be happy, healthy, successful folks. And that is really important work for a social service worker, because not everybody can just like walk off the street and provide that level of support, but also have those like boundaries and those ethics and just that kind of knowledge and wisdom. So that's why we need social service workers. Then you have folks who have their bachelor's degree. So bachelor's is going to encompass some of the work we see in social service worker diplomas, but then they're also going to be doing case management, because in your bachelor's, you start to learn about case management, the concept of person in environment, wrap around care and review of a case and a person's life and all the different supports, and you learn about different programs. So it's someone who focuses maybe a little bit more on the high level and making sure that that person is connected to everything they need to be a happy, healthy individual. The impression I get from the jobs that I'm seeing, the social workers I'm talking to with the bachelors and the masters, is that the bachelors has the most amount of like room to explore and to play and to move. So you can be doing case management. You can be working with folks one-on-one. You can be working other jobs that don't use the title of social worker, like working in community development or program administration and program management. So there's a lot of movement. Versus, now let's get into the master's degree, which is, yes, there are more enticing jobs and jobs that pay well, but you tend to be pigeonholed into very specific places once you do. Schools, hospitals, sometimes the correction system, therapy and therapeutic services, where, like, if you're a therapist, you tend to only offer therapeutic services. If you work in a hospital, you're doing hospital social work. There's not as much room to move. Now, you have more extensive training. That's the big thing, and why the master's tends to be the gold standard, or to be the go-to educational credential that people try to get in social work. It's because they have the most extensive training, and especially I call it extensive wraparound training. So they're looking at cases and situations and scenarios from as many different and complex perspectives as possible, coming to the best conclusions and plan of action to support your consumer. The other reason why kind of the masters is that go-to is because there's training, and then you're expected to balance the greatest number of requirements and considerations and responsibilities. So you've got to be on top of case management and on top of your therapeutic relationship, and you've got to be connecting the person to resources that they need. You've got to be doing it all and juggling it, and that comes with experience, and that comes with that training. And then you have the PhD, which is kind of funny. The PhD, from my research, about only 7 schools at the time of recording offer them roughly, on average, averaging it across all the schools, 7 spots per year. So that's about 49 spots per year, compared to hundreds, if not thousands, of bachelor spots. The PhD is ideal when you need experience in research. So this most applies to research roles, so if you want to keep researching. And remember, research is just about being curious, about going, why does this happen? How does this happen? And then going to investigate that in the long process of research. A PhD will get you expert or consultant roles with different organizations, with government, and most classically will get you into academia and teaching. Though it is very common, when I was looking at schools and where to go for my bachelor's of social work, it is very common that your profs will have a mix of masters and PhDs. And I suspect it's because the PhDs, there's so few spots and they're so competitive, and not everyone goes into academia. And the thing about the PhD in social work that's worth noting is that even if you have a PhD in social work, you still have to add and focus on the credential that you are a registered social worker or social service worker. And you don't get as much recognition for the PhD as you do the master's, because the master's is the last credential where you're learning and practicing social work skills. So that's kind of an interesting double-edged sword that I learned from folks who have a PhD in social work. All of this to say, a social service worker diploma can absolutely get you a job. It's going to be more competitive. The job title may not include the title social service worker, but may use those skills, may benefit from you being registered with the college. A bachelor's degree can definitely get you a job, but you've got to be a little open-minded on like what the job title may be, what the requirements may be, and it may be a little more competitive. A master's is the standard in Ontario. It's going to open up the most opportunities for a job in social work, and a PhD is super niche. Really, folks go into it when you have a lot of questions, when you're interested in research and what research as a skill will get you and where that will take you in your career journey. Comment and let me know, what educational credential are you interested in or pursuing? I know I'm planning on doing my bachelor's, and Beyonce willing above, I will just go straight into the master's, but I will probably stop there. Let me know where you're at with that. As always, make sure you like and subscribe for all things mental health, business, school, and life. Otherwise, we'll chat soon. Bye for now.